I broke a neck at the age of 17, 9 months, spent in hospital, my life turned upside down. I'm here to show you that the smallest things make the biggest difference. I'm going to take you on a journey. I'm going to take you on a journey of the first 26 years of my life of concentrating on the past 9 years, which have seen me go through some of the darkest emotions possible to mankind, but also experience highs in life that I didn't think possible. And I'll show you from my perspective as a patient, the good and the bad experiences I've had with the NHS and the doctors, nurses and care staff that have cared for me. I hope to give you the drive to continue to perform your role to the best of your ability, a role in which throughout your lifetime you'll touch the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of patients and their families. And if you always have in the back of your mind the key messages I'm going to give, your impact will be immeasurable. Now, by way of background, I completed the New York Marathon. I'm a mouth painting artist. I was an Olympic torchbearer in 2012, and I work as a trainee solicitor in London. But it hasn't always been that way. I grew up in Bedfordshire with my two brothers, Andrew and Michael, my dad, who's a professional shop fitter, and my mum, who's a nurse. So I've grown up knowing the value of the nursing profession. At school, I also saw myself as much of an all-rounder. I was fairly good academically, and I had a great love for sport. I played cricket for my school. I played football for my school and county. I was a qualified scuba diver, and I had a great love for rugby. I played rugby for my school, my town, my county, my region. I toured Australia and New Zealand at the age of 16 in 2003, and at the age of 16 was signed to play for the London under 18 Rugby League Academy. But that would change on the 4th of April 2004. On the 4th of April, I was playing in my first game for the Academy away versus Halifax in Yorkshire. The match kicked off, and I remember consciously thinking to myself that my dream of becoming a professional rugby player was one step closer. However, just 20 seconds into the match, as I went into a tackle, as I have done hundreds, if not thousands of times before whilst growing up playing rugby, something went terribly wrong. I've been told that one of my teammates came into the tackle to help complete it, and as he did so, his knee hit me in the side of the neck, breaking my neck instantly. Now, lying on the pitch that day, I can't explain to you the gravity of the emotions that went through my mind. I knew exactly what I'd done, and I can't explain how, but having the physiotherapist ask me if I could move my toes, and I couldn't. Having the paramedics ask me if I could feel them touching my hands, I couldn't. Now, growing up, I've never been exposed to disability. None of my family or friends are disabled, but lying on that pitch that day, my future life as a disabled person literally flashed across my mind. Now, I can't convey the gravity of the emotions that went through my mind, but I'll try and do my best. Can everyone in this room please shut your eyes? Can you cross your legs and place them as far under your chair as possible? If possible, can you sit on your hands and then don't move at all. And now stop breathing. Hold your breath. And whilst doing so, think of losing everything important to you. Your family, your friends, your dreams, your ambitions. Okay, you can breathe. Now, this is what I went through on the pitch that day, but unlike everybody in this room, I knew that if I was to survive, my life would change forever. I stopped breathing on the pitch, fell unconscious, and was airlifted to Leeds General Infirmary. briefly reflect on the experiences of my parents at that time. As I say, I grew up in Bedfordshire, and my dad received a phone call from my rugby coach who explained that I had had an accident playing rugby. Now my dad has since told me that this didn't immediately convey any fears for him, because growing up I was always getting injured, a broken collarbone, a broken hand, a broken nose. But my coach then explained that I had a neck injury and had been airlifted to hospital. And my dad then had the prospect of telling my mum, who's a nurse, the situation, and they had the 3-hour journey from Bedfordshire up to Leeds, not knowing if I was okay. My mum, being a nurse, knew what the worst case scenario with a neck injury could be, paralysis. And she's told me that she had a mobile phone on her lap the whole way up to Leeds. She knew that if I was okay, the first thing I'd do would be to ring her and tell her I was okay. And so the longer the amount of time that passed without me contacting her, the more serious they knew it was. Now, upon arrival at Leeds, they were met in the reception by the neuroconsultant, who asked them to go into the family and relatives room. Now, my mum knows from her experience as a nurse that people are only taken into this room for bad news to be broken. So yeah, I think as a defence mechanism, she refused to go in there. She just wanted to see her son and tell me it was going to be okay. Now, upon arrival at Leeds, I was admitted into the neuro-intensive care unit and kept sedated. Due to the fact that I'd stopped breathing on the pitch, it was unclear whether I'd sustained brain damage due to oxygen starvation. But what was clear from the scans was that I'd suffered a dislocation of the 3rd and the 4th vertebra in my neck, and the prospect that if and when I was to awake, likely severely disabled, was clear. In order to determine whether I had sustained brain damage, the decision was taken to wake me up. When it was said, the doctors asked my family to be there with them. They knew that if I recognised my mum's voice, there was a good chance that my brain was functioning okay. Now, I was intubated and therefore couldn't speak, was heavily sedated and couldn't move any part of my body as I had traction applied to my skull in an attempt to stretch my spine and release the pressure that the damaged vertebrae were placing on my spinal cord. If I understood what was being said to me, I should blink once. Do you know who you are? One blink. Do you know what your name is? One blink. Do you know where you are? One blink. Do you know what I'm going to say to you? One blink. I didn't need to be told that I'd broken my neck, that I'd never again voluntarily move any parts of my body below my neck, that my chances of survival were unclear, and the life that I had lived, loved, enjoyed, but ultimately taken for granted, the first 17 years and 15 days of my life was over. I knew. My mum tried telling me I was going to be okay. I knew I wasn't okay. I tried to shake my head to show her. I knew I wasn't okay. I couldn't. I had 7 pounds of lead weights attached to screws that had been drilled into my skull in an attempt to stretch my spine. I think my mum understood. I spent 12 days in intensive care in Leeds, during which time a permanent tracheostomy was surgically inserted, which allows me to be permanently ventilated by means of a ventilator, which provides me with 12 breaths of air a minute, 720 breaths of air an hour, 17,280 breaths of air a day, and will do for the rest of my life. My recollection of my time in Leeds is extremely vague. I was heavily sedated and extremely poorly. However, I do remember the nightmares, the horrible dreams in which I could no longer move. In that first split second when I woke up, that's all it was, a dream. And then reality hit. I remember somebody brushing my teeth for me for the first time. I remember losing all my dignity, having to have my bum washed because I'd lost all bladder and bowel control. I was a 17-year-old boy trapped in a body that no longer worked. I couldn't eat. I was fed through a tube going into my nose and down into my stomach. I couldn't drink. Once every few hours, I was allowed a wet sponge to be placed on my lips to quench my thirst. It was unbearable. Now, after 12 days in Leeds, no bed had still become available at either of the 2 specialist spinal units nearest to my home in Bedfordshire. And so the decision was taken to transfer me down to the Luton Dunstable Hospital to be near friends and family whilst I wait for a specialist. The spinal bed continued. Now, upon arrival at Luton, I was transferred into intensive care and assigned one-to-one care throughout the day and night. I still didn't understand what was happening to my body and didn't understand what the machines and wires were for that I was attached to. I didn't know how they worked and what would happen if one fell off. If one did fall off, how would I attract somebody's attention? I couldn't move and I couldn't speak. So therefore I tried to make any noise possible with my mouth. And I discovered that if I moved my tongue in a certain manner in my mouth, I could make a clicking sound. Now, for the first time in 3 weeks, I had a means of expressing myself, and this click became my lifeline, literally. However, it was during my time in Luton that one of the most upsetting, frustrating, and distressing things happened, which still to this day send shivers down my spine. I was unable to sleep, and I'd struggled to since my accident. I was starting to be given more and more sedation to help me sleep, but the more I was given, the more anxious and disturbed I became. During the endless hours of day and night when I was awake, I could feel myself slipping into a deeper void. I was becoming more aware of the life that I'd lost, and that this life was different. This was a life where I was trapped in a hospital, attached to machines and wires. I couldn't eat, drink, sleep, talk, or move. I thought to myself, bloody hell man, you've really fucked this up for yourself. It was on one of these occasions in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep that I desperately tried to attract the attention of the night staff nurse who had been assigned to care for me. My tracheostomy side was extremely painful, and I was scared that my ventilator wasn't giving me enough air. I tried attracting her attention by clicking. 1 click, nobody came. 2 clicks, nobody came. 3 clicks, 4 clicks, 5 clicks. But no matter how many times I clicked, nobody came. Panic started to set in. Why wouldn't this lady help me? Now eventually she came over, but rather than taking the time to try and understand what was wrong with me by reading the words I was desperately trying to mouth to her, all she did was check the monitors, check the bed, look at my face before walking to the base of the bed and telling me that patience is a virtue, and then walking away. Now, to put that in context, I was a 17-year-old boy who had 3 weeks earlier broken his neck and destroyed his life. I didn't understand what was happening to my body and I desperately needed her help. Now, this hit home like a bombshell. I think at this point I'd begun to realise that I was dependent upon other people, that every one of my care needs, but I hadn't before this time understood that I may be dependent upon people who may not necessarily care. This lady couldn't find it within herself to try and understand the personal hell I was going through, and didn't seem to understand that I was just a scared young boy. Now, those in the hospital and those who are physically poorly are there because of your expertise. They place themselves entirely under your control and are entirely reliant upon the care you provide. Often these times in hospital can be life-changing, pivotal experiences, and something which to you as a nurse doesn't seem that important may be seen as entirely important and fundamental by the patient you're caring for. Unlike the nurse looking after me in Luton, rather than performing your clinical role to the letter, where possible, try to understand what your patients are going through, and where possible, take the extra step to make that patient experience that little bit better. A smile, a listening ear, treating your patients with respect as an individual. The smallest things make the biggest difference. Now, having spent 12 days in Leeds and a further week in Luton, I was finally transferred to the National Spinal Injury Centre at Stoke Mandeville. Now, although this was clearly a very positive step on my long road to recovery, it was also a very dark time personally. I think before this point, I'd been in denial, simply hoping that it was a temporary injury that would improve over time. But by passing through the doors of the spinal unit, I had to face up to the fact that I'd damaged my spinal cord irreparably and that my life had changed forever. Now, during my time in intensive care in Stoke Mandeville, I remember my family bringing me a newspaper article which contained a report reporting on the success that my rugby team, the Billswade under-17s, had in a national competition. Now, they'd won the competition and they'd dedicated the victory to me. But whilst reading that article, I had to face up to the fact that whilst my teammates were competing to win trophies, I was laying in intensive care, competing just to stay alive. It was an incredibly dark time.
Now, last month, you could say that 17-year-old Matthew King from Bedfordshire had it all: a talented student, a good family and a real passion for rugby.
Sadly, while playing his last game, Matthew was badly injured. Now he's being treated for spinal injuries at the Stoke Mandeville Hospital. Our chief reporter Kim Riley has been to meet him for tonight's special report.
He wears his London Broncos shirt with pride. It was a tackle just 1 minute into a game that left Matt unable to move his body, unable to breathe without a ventilator. Every day, his parents, Chris and Glenda, are at his bedside. At the National Spine Injuries Unit, he's in the very best hands.
Matthew dislocated the third and the fourth vertebra of his neck. And this, as a result of it, will cause damage to the spinal cord, which is sitting right behind the vertebrae. He underwent surgery which reduced the dislocation and with a fixation from the front and the back to secure it and make it heal.
Matt has been snowed under with good wishes, had many visitors to his bedside. They were collecting for his fund at the recent Rugby League Challenge Cup final. His friends at the Biggleswade Rugby Club active in support of a boy who played for his county and region and toured Australia with the Bedfordshire Tigers.
It's difficult because he's such a good friend. We've been on tour together, we've been playing rugby for the last 5 years, very close together. To see him in that state, not being able to move, is very, very difficult.
What message do you most want to get across tonight? To say thank you to everybody. What are your aims now? You've had to look at your life in a different way, of course, but what's your target?
To get home as quickly as possible and to try and lead as normal a life as possible.
And you still want to go and watch rugby?
I want to go and watch Bedford.
Does he feel bitter about what happened?
No, not at all. Neither of us are bitter. He had an accident playing rugby, a sport that he loved. No one's bitter. We've just got to move on and just be determined and stick together for his sake and for the family's sake.
Matthew has had times where he's been very down, particularly when he first came down here. Obviously, he's very aware of the situation, of what's been going on and of his future prospects. But, he is determined. He's very brave and he just says, what I've got is what I've got and I've got to deal with it.
Glenda King talking about her son Matthew.
Now, during my time in Stoke Mandeville, I was incredibly fortunate with the support I received from family, friends, also complete strangers who went out of their way to help me. In my 9-month stay in hospital, there were only 2 days in which I didn't receive a visitor, and when I compare this to the lack of support received by other patients, I simply can't put a value on that support. Looking back, without it, I would more than likely have given up. Now, in any walk of life, never underestimate the importance of a strong support network and how important this can be to helping you achieve your goals. Without one, you're fighting single-handedly to achieve your goals by yourself, but together you can work together to achieve a common goal. At work, you'll be more successful and ultimately provide a better quality of service to the patients you care for if you work together as a cohesive team. Good communication and clear direction and what you're striving to achieve as a team are key. Now, at that time, I thought to myself, if other people hadn't given up on me, it wouldn't be fair for me to give up on myself. And it was this that drove me to work hard at my rehabilitation. But saying that, the toughest times were when I was left alone with my own thoughts and left alone by myself in the middle of the night. These times in the middle of the night were the worst times I can remember from hospital. I was a 17-year-old boy, paralysed from the neck down, having to spend 9 months away from friends and family in hospital, and all this at a time when I should be doing things that a normal 17-year-old lad should be doing. Whether that's friends, girlfriends, work, sport, or travel. Now, it was on one of these occasions in the middle of the night in Stoke Mandeville when I remember the night staff nurse spent in the early hours of the morning sitting down and talking to me. Nurse Tracy had worked on the spinal unit for 8 years and was there for me when I most needed support. She listened to what I had to say and did her best to provide support, advice, and encouragement. Nurse Tracy told me about ex-patients who had gone on to successfully rebuild their lives. Nurse Tracy told me about spinal charities established to help people with a spinal injury gain independence again. But given that I was so young and had such a high level of spinal cord injury, Nurse Tracy had never worked or looked after somebody with such comprehensive care needs at such a young age, and therefore, whilst I did believe it was possible for other people to achieve the things she was saying, I didn't think it would be possible for me. I did have the injustice of taking her words with a pinch of salt. But looking back, the time spent with Nurse Tracy, the example she'd given, and the things she had said, planted the seeds of hope in the back of my mind that it would be possible to rebuild my life. Albeit subconsciously, the foundations and building blocks my long road to recovery were laid that night. It was this little thing that Nurse Tracy did that she may not even have recognised as being particularly important, which to me, as a patient, I found entirely important and fundamental, so much so that I'm sat here telling you about it 9 years down the line. The smallest things make the biggest difference. Now, although my time in Stoke Mandeville was really quite a bleak experience, I do remember one day when my mum and I experienced one of the funniest things to happen during that time. I was learning to drive my new wheelchair, which I drive with a chin control. And as you can imagine, it takes quite some getting used to. I was driving around the ward with my mum, and I've become very cold. See, because of my level of spinal cord injury, I can no longer regulate my temperature. I can't shiver in the winter to stay warm, and I can't sweat in the summer to cool down, and so I take on the temperature of the surrounding environment. Now the ward was cold, and so I'd become cold. And I asked my mum to heat up a lavender pad in the microwave. The mum did this, and I asked her to place it behind my neck to warm me up. But as she did so, the pad pushed my face forward onto the chin control. I couldn't get my face off the chin control, and my wheelchair started crewing off uncontrollably down the corridor with my mum hanging onto the back of it. I hit the wall in my wheelchair and gouged along the wall until I hit another patient in a wheelchair at the end of the corridor. Now picture the scene, a 17-year-old lad pulling his mum along in a wheelchair and a wheelchair piled up at the end of the corridor. You know, it's quite a bleak experience at the time, but I can see the funny side of it now. Having spent 9 months in hospital, I was finally discharged home on the 17th of December 2004, at that time being the fastest discharge of a ventilator patient from Stoke Mandeville. Now, having been discharged in December, I spent the first few months following my return home simply trying to come to terms with my disability, and more than anything come to terms with my complete reliance upon other people for every one of my needs. In effect, I'd done very little living during this time and could already feel myself becoming lonely and stagnating at home. In February 2005, one of my best friends, Sarah, came around and we were just having a general catch-up. She was telling me about what she'd been up to and what her plans were for the future. At that time, she was revising for her A-levels, following which she was going to go travelling in the summer and thereafter read law at the University of East Anglia. Now, at this time, I suddenly realised that although I received such a great deal of support following my accident, and it was only the support that allowed me to rebuild my life, the time had now come for people to move on with their lives. I suddenly realised that unless I built a life for myself, I'd soon be left at home, stagnating, becoming lonely, and not make any impact on this world, or be remembered for anything other than the lad that suffered such a devastating injury at such a young age. And although cliche as if a light bulb had been turned on, and looking back, I can pinpoint this day, the day when I took the decision to make the best of what I still had to offer, both physically or otherwise. Now, if the talk given to me by Nurse Tracy had planted the seeds of hope in the back of my mind that it would be possible to rebuild my life, this realisation that unless I stopped seeing myself as a victim, but rather took accountability for my situation, that I'd lead a long, lonely life, turn that seed of hope into something tangible, something I could work with. And when combined with the support of my family, which was nothing less than complete, I knew that failure wasn't an option. I knew that I had to rebuild my life. And although at that time I didn't know how I was going to do that, I knew that I had to succeed. Now, mindset is key. And with the belief that you can achieve your goals, you can achieve all you want to in life. I was forced into this situation by my accident, my disability, and although everybody in this room has different goals and aspirations they want to achieve, the principle remains the same. Believe that you can achieve your goals, apply yourself to achieving that aim, and you will find a way of doing it, just as I did. Now, I was still young, had a relatively good brain in me, and therefore I took the decision to return to school, complete my education, and try and build a career for myself. So as soon as at my sights, I entered the legal profession. Now, following my decision to return to school, I started back on a very part-time basis in March 2005, literally for 3 or 4 hours a week. Now, although at that time I'd been living with my disability for almost a year, I don't think I'd come to terms with the situation and how I was perceived by others, so my confidence was still at an all-time low. And I remember that each trip into school was incredibly daunting and scary. Now, on one of these occasions in March 2005, I was in the process of getting out of my wheelchair-accessible vehicle via the wheelchair lift when I looked up towards the school building. There was a group of 5 or 6 students watching me, and although this was disconcerting in itself, it wasn't that affected me. It was the fact that one of the students was pointing and laughing hysterically at me. Now I found myself at a crossroads. I could either take the easy option, which would be to give in to what happened, get back in the van, go home and give up on myself. Or I could confront what just happened, and although that moment destroyed me, continue with going into school that day and continue with rebuilding my life. Unfortunately, I took the latter option. I'm so thankful I did, because 9 years down the line, I've been fortunate enough to read law at university and now be working as a trainee solicitor in London. I like to think that I lead a relatively normal life. I enjoy going out for a drink with my mates, taking my dog for a walk. And in fact, although I do like to think I lead a normal life, I don't think it is that normal. A few weeks ago I went out with my younger brother for his birthday, and we're having just a general catch up and a bit of a heart-to-heart over a couple of beers. But as soon as his friends turned up and my friends turned up, a few beers turned into a few Jaeger bombs. A few Jaeger bombs turned into a few tequilas. And to cut a long story short, I ended up leaving the pub at 2 a.m. in the morning. I don't remember this. Going down the middle of Bedford High Street doing donuts in my wheelchair. Police behind me, stopping vehicles coming close to me. So I guess my life isn't that normal. Now in October 2005, I attended a ski taster day for pupils suffering from spinal cord injury at long dry ski slope. Now going skiing, despite my disability, was something that Nurse Tracy had told me was possible in hospital, but which I didn't think was true. Now with this in mind, I turned up at the dry ski slope with very limited expectations, thinking that I'd be turned away because of my lack of movement or my ventilator dependency. I could not be more wrong. Literally within 20 minutes of arriving, I was being physically lifted out of my wheelchair into a ski cart by 4 burly men who secured my arms and legs using gaffer tape, bungee cords, and a bit of ingenuity. Now, although only brief for 25 minutes of it, going up and down Blackpool dry ski slope was the most exciting, exhilarating, and fantastic 25 minutes I've spent since my accident. On the back of that experience, I was accepted to take part in a week-long skiing course in Sweden. Now Sweden, however, is a whole different kettle of fish. Firstly, there were a whole number of unknowns. We didn't know how my wheelchair would function in the snow and the ice of Sweden. We didn't know how my ventilator would function in the cold of Sweden. And to put it bluntly, we didn't know how my body would function in Sweden. As I said earlier, I take on the temperature of the surrounding environment, so travelling to Sweden with the minus 20 degree temperatures wasn't ideal. But you only live once, and so I went for it. Now, as with my experience at Bracknell, I had very limited expectations on that first morning in Sweden, thinking that we'd spend much of the day trying to overcome one of the many obstacles posed by my disability. But again, I could not be more wrong. By 9 a.m. I was out skiing on the slopes, and looking back, I can pinpoint one of those times in your life that you know you're going to remember to your dying day. I was 18 years old, 3,000 miles away from home, paralysed from the neck down, strapped into a ski cart. I was secured into my gaffer tape and bungee cords with a crazed Swedish ski instructor telling me I was going to be okay, dude. That was literally one of the scariest times of my life, but I guess this moment, more than any other, epitomises what I want to say, that there's always a way to achieve your goals. There's always a way to overcome the obstacles in front of you. It may not be the obvious route, but having made it to Sweden, there was no way that I would be able to go skiing and sitting in that dry ski, so sitting at the top of that ski slope, prove that. Now going skiing, despite my disability, was only possible because of the mindset of the ski school and the ski instructor. It wasn't a fundamental change in philosophy, it was just a 1% change in mindset and a can-do attitude to get me out on the slopes. Now I believe that the provision of the 6 Cs and the implementation of the 6 Cs is just a 1% change in mindset. Nurses know how to look after people, but I truly believe it's not what you do, but it's how you do it. And that is the 1% change in mindset that you need to adopt. The smallest things make the biggest difference. Now, as I said at the start, I've been incredibly fortunate with the support I've received since my accident, and it's only because of the support that I am where I am today. But saying that, the time came when I no longer felt comfortable simply sitting back and accepting other people's kindness and generosity, but rather wanted to try and give something back. Now, with this in mind, after much discussion and negotiation, I was accepted to take part in the 2007 ING New York Marathon. Now, the marathon was a whole kettle of unknowns. Following my accident, I lost all muscle tone in my neck to the extent that if I wanted to turn my neck on the bed, somebody had to turn my head for me. And so, driving my wheelchair for 26 miles around the streets of New York was a massive challenge, and I spent 6 months training before just by driving around the roads near my home in Bedfordshire. But despite the training, it was one of the most tiring days I've ever experienced. We had to be on the start line by 10 o'clock. But in order to get there, we had to get a bus at 6 o'clock in the morning, which meant a 3:30 start for me and my care team. But as soon as we crossed the start line, we were making good progress. But almost immediately, as I was crossing Staten Island Bridge, I started to experience problems with my wheelchair. Now, the voltage in the US is different to the UK, and so my batteries weren't charged as much as they should have been, and so not only was I going slower, but it also meant that I wouldn't make it to the 13-mile mark when I arranged to meet a wheelchair engineer who was going to change the batteries in my wheelchair in what was effectively a pit stop. But the team of runners I was with proved to be the best team you could wish for, and refusing to leave me and helping me get to the 11-mile mark, where we'd rearranged to meet the wheelchair engineer. Now, to get from the 13-mile mark to the 11-mile mark, the wheelchair engineer literally had to take his life in his own hands. He had to find a rickshaw driver that would take not only him, but also the wheelchair batteries halfway across New York in record time. Now, I guess fortunately, or unfortunately, he found a rickshaw driver who took this mission to heart and proceeded to risk both their lives by crossing both an American football pitch whilst the match was in progress. And the same to a junior league game of baseball. But thankfully, he made it to the 11-mile mark just in time to change the batteries on my wheelchair. But by the time the batteries were changed, my team and I were unmasked with only the police behind us to bring up the rear. But as soon as the batteries were fitted and I was back up to speed, we were soon making our way back through the field, and the second half of the marathon definitely made up for the problems I experienced during the first half. By the time we entered Central Park, it was getting cold, it was getting dark, but we were still going strong. Those final miles around Central Park, driving my wheelchair in the cold, were by far the hardest I've ever experienced, but as a team we crossed the finish line in 6 hours and 40 minutes. Now, completing the marathon is certainly not something I ever contemplated as being possible in hospital. And again, I think it just goes to show that if you want something in life and you've got the imagination and determination, you can achieve what you want to.
So a nice early start for Matt and the team. They're on the bus over there. It's 6:10. They've got to go to Staten Island now.
Still a bit nervous, but really looking forward to it.
Tired, scared, excited, but we're here.
Have fun, have fun, have fun. I'm so proud of you.
New York is the world's biggest marathon, with 40,000 people taking part, and they've all got a story to tell. Matt's was about making history. No one with his level of injury had completed a marathon before, paralysed from the neck down, his chin controlling the wheelchair's movements. It's not just Matt who's flying the flag for Bedfordshire. You may recognise this lady as well. Paula Ratcliffe's getting a great reception from the crowd here in Brooklyn. We caught up again with Matt and his team, the 13 Heroes Rugby League charity, just over the halfway mark.
We're counting down the miles rather than up, and a lot of people And you know, there's a beer at the end of it waiting for you.
How's your boy doing?
He's doing good. You know, we had a bit of a problem with the battery, but we've got that sorted now, and the crowds are fantastic. Absolutely amazing experience.
So Matt and the team still going strong and crucially in control of their inhibitions, unlike this New Yorker. The city folk were lining the streets, hanging off balconies, even cuddling to keep warm on steps. 2 million in total, all present and correct. But as Matt's day started in darkness, it was going to finish in darkness. The clock said just over 7 hours, but in reality more like 6.5. Matt had made history.
Yeah, there was an occasion out there today at about the 5 mile mark when I just pulled to the side of the road and said, look, you guys just leave me because I can't go on. And literally was in tears and saying I can't go on, and the rest of the team pulled me through, saying if we're out here till midnight pushing you, then that's what we'll do.
But that's when Matt's story took a dramatic twist. The ventilator which controls his breathing was critically low of battery.
The bit after was really scary because the ventilator was actually on such a low battery. We didn't know how long we had left before it was going to stop working. So we actually had to rush back to the hotel and connect him up to another battery as quickly as we could.
Thankfully, a dangerous situation didn't turn critical, and Matt, although shattered from the experience, had completed his first and only marathon.
Happy I did it and achieved it, but I think it will be a once in a lifetime because I'm not going to be doing it again.
Yeah, we just hope he sticks to that decision. And,
I've written it down.
Yeah.
As I said at the start, the past 9 years since, Max has seen me go through some of the darkest emotions possible to mankind, but also experience highs in life I didn't think possible. But when I think back, I can pinpoint the start of that process and the start of that rehabilitation, time spent with me by Nurse Tracy. The smallest things make the biggest difference. Thank you.